In my last retro rant about Nintendo, I ended it by saying, we can't give companies a free pass just because we like them, because they'll just keep going down the same path. There's a point where they should have stopped and they've clearly passed it. But they should not be thinking, let's keep going and see what happens, because we know what's going to happen and Sega can attest to that. What I meant by that is by continuing to make mistakes and letting them stay uncorrected means you'll suffer the consequences for them later. Sega can say that's something they've done, as they did with the Saturn and then the Dreamcast. The Saturn was a really good system, but it was a bitch to code for at the time because of its dual CPUs. Granted, they gave developers the really powerful hardware they wanted, but Sony lured them in with something easy to develop for. Then the Dreamcast came out, and even though they were advised to go third party, Sega was burning through money because they were trying to undercut the PS2, selling the Dreamcast at a substantial loss, while Sony had the advantage because they were using their own tech and own factories to build the PS2, and them being one of the 4 companies that helped develop DVDs really helped them out as well. Sega, on the other hand, had to buy all the parts and pay a different company to build the systems. I've heard people say that Nintendo has money in the bank so they're fine, or arguments that are similar. However, it's a fleeting argument. Money in the bank does not last forever, especially when their profits are going down, so they've been laying off employees. As without profit, they can't invest it into new projects, nor can they pay overhead. And their stock is also on the decline, so investors are going to bail out. We've seen this happen many times over, where a game company goes on such a steep decline, they eventually close their doors and sell off their assets. And just because it's Nintendo, that doesn't mean it can't happen to them. That's a really bad hubris to have, and with the way Nintendo operates, I wouldn't be surprised if they'd rather go out of business instead of going third party. But I think that they should withdraw from being a console maker, if the NX flops. And I'm going to stress that again. If the NX flops, Nintendo should withdraw from being a console maker and go third party. Because they've been on that road of refusal to adapt to the changing times. When Microsoft changed online multiplayer with consoles with the original Xbox, you knew that Sony had to follow suit with their next console, and they did so with the PlayStation 3. Nintendo didn't really embrace it that much with the Wii. While Sony and Microsoft allowed easy communication between players online, the Wii was still cumbersome with its weird online code thing. They did get things mostly right with the Wii U's online services, so I'll give them that, even though it still feels kind of primitive. But it may be too late for them to try and adapt now, especially since Sony is going on its 4th generation of console domination and sharing the latter 2 of those years with Microsoft. We've seen Borders, Blockbuster, and Hollywood Video go out of business because of a refusal to adapt, like when Netflix came around and started streaming movies. Kodak, who developed a digital camera in 1975, were too scared of the technology, so they didn't adapt to it. And then they went bankrupt because of other companies embracing the new technology, but they did manage to survive. And when you look up a lot of big businesses that refused to adapt because they didn't adjust to the customer demands, they went under. Nintendo is unfortunately in that very same boat right now, but they're trying to subvert their ship from sinking. But I don't think a new console is the answer. Think about it. For a new console, they need to pour a lot of money into research and development. Then they'll need to hire an outside company to build and assemble the system. Then they'll have to make development kits and software and everything else that goes into making a video game system. Nintendo is mostly a game company. If they screw that up, they really have nothing else to fall back on, unlike Sony, who has more than just PlayStation, and Microsoft, who has more than just Xbox. If Nintendo were to go third party, it would benefit them more financially, especially now. There would be no need for them to invest in hardware and software engineering. All they would need to do is make games. With smartphones being the more dominant platform for portable gaming, especially in Japan, there would be no need for them to have cartridges manufactured for a dedicated handheld, especially since current smartphones are more powerful than the new 3DS. And there's a variety of controllers that are compatible with smartphones if the player didn't want to use touch controls. It would also be more beneficial to gamers, since it seems that most people have either an Xbox One or PS4 or PC, having one system but not the other. There would be no need to buy a single system just for Nintendo's exclusives. It doesn't make sense to drop a couple $100s on a system just for a small handful of games. People are going to buy a system that they think will give them the most value for the next 5 or more years. So for Nintendo, if they were to release their games on 3 platforms, they'd have a near 100% chance of a sale instead of the 25% or lower chance if they were to release it on their own dedicated system. Some people may be concerned about Pokemon, since the purpose of it is to be portable, when in reality its original purpose was more for use of the Game Boy Link cable, so it needed to be portable. But is there a reason for it to be a portable title anymore? The games use the internet to trade and battle now instead of using a physical connection requiring two people to be in proximity to each other. And if you care about tournaments, there's always a way to make that work. And Pokemon could work on a smartphone. Adult Swim's Pocket Morty's game is proof of concept for it, and there's even Pokemon Go coming out, and they're kinda partnering with Google for that one. It just makes sense for Nintendo to go third party now. Their stock is falling, their revenue has gone down, profits are down, assets and equity is down, hardware and software output is down, number of employees is down, a lot of stuff is going down for them. When Sega went third party, it's because they burned through so much money by trying to compete with Sony that they had no choice. Nintendo's problem is a refusal to adapt. I used to rail on them for ignoring the American market and focusing more on the Japanese one, but they're even ignoring the Japanese market now. Nintendo released the new 3DS because regular 3DS sales in Japan were down, and the original 3DS has been discontinued in Japan. And the new 3DS is pretty much what the original 3DS should have been. And how many games out there have been released that are only for the new 3DS? About 6? There's really no incentive to buy it. In fact, with the new 3DS, in the 2 years it's been out, it's sold about 8 million systems worldwide. That's 4 million a year. Compare that to the original, which is around 60 million units in the 5 years it's been out, resulting in about 12 million systems per year. So instead of adapting to Japan leaning towards smartphones for portable gaming, they spent money in research and development so they could make a better 3DS, so they could release only 6 games that took advantage of its slightly pumped up hardware. This kind of goes back to the free pass, where they make stupid mistakes that are swept under the rug. If there's no reason for people to buy a new 3DS, then what's the point of it? You wasted R&D money for something that you're not going all gung-ho to support. The new 3DS is the equivalent to the PlayStation Vita, something that was made and that the company who made it isn't really supporting. And right now we're 2.5 years into the 8th generation of systems. These 8th gen systems are running on hardware from gaming PCs from 2012, to the point where Sony wants to release an upgraded PlayStation 4 that's 4K compatible. And the Wii U is around 3.5 years old, and when they release the NX, the Wii U will have been out for 4.5 years. And if the NX is as powerful as the Xbox One or PlayStation 4 as the rumors have been suggesting, and let's say that this current generation doesn't last that long, the average life is 5 years. So if the 8th gen, which started at the end of 2013, ends in 2018 with the PlayStation 5 and Xbox whatever, then Nintendo will be behind again, as the NX will be obsolete compared to Sony and Microsoft systems and PCs, which third-party developers will make games for because that's where the money is. The Wii was a shovelware system that was only successful because it sold itself on a gimmick. Third parties knew that, which is why the big third parties distanced themselves away from it when they realized the gimmick didn't work, sticking with Sony, Microsoft, and PC. Then the Wii U came out and the situation got worse. Nintendo needs to bank on the 8th generation lasting as long as the 7th generation did, which set a record of about 10 years as opposed to the industry standard of 5. And the 8th generation might not last more than 5 years. So they should just go third party, as Nintendo's making similar mistakes that Sega made. They're walking that path, and I know I sound like a broken record because I've been saying that for quite some time now. But as the saying goes, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Like when Blizzard made Diablo 3 online only and no one could play it for a week. And then EA did the same thing with SimCity and the result was the same. Going third party is currently the best option for Nintendo, because it will not only save them money from developing new hardware, maintaining online servers, and keeping the operating system updated, but they would make more money because they could sell their games on multiple platforms and focus more attention to making games instead of hardware. And some of you may be saying that I could use similar logic for Sony and Microsoft for them to give up making consoles and go third party. And don't worry, there's a retro rant for that coming soon.